the presence that is experienced when you're right now, and you recognize right now, and you recognize your presence, doesn't just stop at the body. Everything else that's present with that presence is a part of it. There's no mental division happening saying, this is this presence and that's that presence. This is Kyle and that's those trees. Well, that's not there. So presence itself is seen to be undivided. Hey, my friend. If you caught my last video on what is enlightenment, you may have noticed that I talked quite a bit about why enlightenment is a real thing that happens to a human being. But you may not have heard me talk much about or offer very many concepts about what enlightenment is itself. So I thought I'd do a part two to that video where I kind of round things out a bit with some more concepts. I did mention that enlightenment is where silence takes center stage in your life. What used to be a noisy center is now a silent one. I remember just after I had had that awakening, going out on a date with a girl, and she was wondering what was up with me, and I wasn't acting like the usual old Kyle. But I kept saying over and over again, I remember, everything's so quiet. Everything's so quiet. And what was really hitting me was that when there's finally silence inside, when that's finally taken over, the world out here actually becomes quiet too. It seems like the world's always kind of a noisy place, we assume, but it's actually a projection of what's going on inside of us. So literally everything seemed very quiet and still does. So that's one aspect of the experience. And like I said, the narration ends. There's really just life happening, experience happening, but it doesn't need to be happening for anybody anymore. Obviously, there's still the character, Kyle, moving through life with, its to-do lists, but only on the most fundamental level. There's not really an added layer of egoic hypnosis happening, or there's this fictitious little me saying, I'm doing this, me, my life, my goals, my successes, my failures. That's not happening. And the other difficult thing to try to point to is that when enlightenment happens, and this is paradoxical, it happens within this physiological system of this particular character. However, when it happens, you could say that everything else becomes enlightened too. Everyone else, because it's not just the end of the ego inside, it's also the end of the ego outside. And it's much like I was saying about the noise. When the noise finally ends and there's a silence outside as well. In a similar way, when the ego dies, the ego dies out there as well. And so you really do see beauty everywhere. You see through the play of ego that other human beings are involved in. You don't see their egos because you don't see your own. You can see that they're, you could say, hypnotized by what appears to be an ego, a seemingly real little me, but it's not there. So you really just see the innocence in everybody immediately, directly. It's beautiful. So it's easy to have a compassion for everybody. I often compare it to just seeing people kind of like sleepwalking. You know, if you wake up in the morning and the person next to you wakes up kind of, but not really, and they're kind of just moving around in a daze and they're bumping into things and they're sleepwalking. You're not going to view them any differently. You just have a compassion. You try to help them not hurt themselves until they, you know, more fully wake up. So everything becomes enlightened when enlightenment happens in you. It's the end of all hierarchies. Thank God. Thank God there's an end to that. That's why that statement is so helpful and important, you could say, which is if you see the Buddha on your path, kill him, because this attachment to hierarchies is a pretty big impediment because it doesn't make sense ultimately. So just think of any spiritual teaching, tradition, spiritual teacher out there that you've really resonated with. You can notice there's a slight tendency to pedestalize, to place them slightly above where you are, and that's just a natural thing, but a natural tendency, but it is one that is not helpful. So the end of the struggle to stand out is a huge blessing that happens. Some other concepts that are often lended to try to describe enlightenment is God realization. Realizing that you are God and that everything else is God. And I agree with that concept, that description. Uh, because when that false center dissolves and there's just silence, there's no longer that mental division maker operating. And so that silence doesn't just stop at the edge of the body, it continues on into everything else. The presence that is experienced when you're right now, and you recognize right now, and you recognize your presence, doesn't just stop at the body. Everything else that's present with that presence is a part of it. There's no mental division happening saying, this is this presence and that's that presence. This is Kyle and that's those trees. Well, that's not there. So presence itself is seen to be undivided. The unified intelligence of everything becomes amplified. Or as the famous words from Nisargadatta would say, I am that. There's a clean recognition that you are everything. Everything is you. So that's a pretty decent concept to give towards enlightenment. it's still even that you can still sense a slight identification in there, right? The cleanest, if you want to call it the cleanest description to give to enlightenment is just non-identity, not even claiming I am that, but just nothing. It's just what is. There's awareness, aware unto itself, and nothing is separate from that awareness. There's no little me saying anything, not even I am that. No ownership happening. And the paradox is that you inherit everything through that relinquishment of ownership. So even as I'm saying these things to try to describe enlightenment, because it's not something that is withheld from you, and it is your underlying, ultimately it's your underlying reality, even though there may still be a very busy, you know, mind identified state of consciousness happening. You can still sense what I'm saying to be true because it is still your reality as well underneath of whatever it is you're experiencing psychologically or emotionally, which is why you move towards this enlightenment eventually, because it's not actually something that's foreign to you. That's why I still offer these attempts to describe the indescribable, because I know that they can kind of help, you know, act as a nudging mechanism towards freedom, because you know that you can feel the truth of it in yourself, that it's a reality that is inside of you, you know, just waiting to come to the forefront, even more so. It's been described enlightenment when you look around with your perception. I think it was Eckhart Tolle described it as seeing a spaciousness around everything. And the way my mind tried to describe it in the beginning was just kind of seeing everything as being fake. Um, Kind of like a movie prop. Everything seems to have been placed there intentionally by design, and was every molecule of that particular thing was created, was formed by creativity. Every single thing, every blade of grass, every cloud, every tree, you know. And this is all a great gift, obviously, that we all have within us. And we are all going to see this at some point, even if it's not your experience just yet, because it's your true nature. And the path that everybody is on is just simply a process of letting go of what's not your true nature. So this is a guaranteed win, you could say. If I were a betting man, I would put all of my, you know, chips on the table here. I know that you got a winning ticket. Someone had commented recently on the last video on this subject that I did, about how they had for a while felt some relief from just believing the idea that there is no such thing as enlightenment, and that way, I can kind of feel like I can call off the search, you know. But they also said that it left room for despair at the same time because then it started to seem like there's no end to suffering. There's no such thing as becoming free. No such thing as liberation. That suffering is going to be a lifelong companion. So this is the great practice is it's a twofold process of calling off the search moment to moment while simultaneously acknowledging that this is a process and dissolution takes time. Old programming takes time to dissolve. So just coming from that place of calling off the search is incredibly helpful and necessary, while simultaneously acknowledging that the process of dissolution of the egoic sense of self dissolving, that takes time. And the more of a yearning you have to call off the search, the more rapid the process of dissolution will be. Join me this November for a retreat in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. I'll be holding a 4-day retreat there, diving into this state of let go collectively as a group. I'm sure it's bound to bring some beautiful shifts in everybody that's there. So you can check out the link below. Bye for now.